You're listening to the Art Said podcast, episode number 5, Redefining Creativity, a conversation with Dr. Matthew Murphy. Welcome to the Art Said podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shawna Longo and Edric DeBost. In our last episode, Edric and I talked about intentionality and goal setting, as well as defining the role and purpose of the arts within your school and or district. Today, I am very excited to continue that conversation by bringing on a guest, and not only a guest, our first guest on the podcast, Dr. Matthew Murphy. Hello, Dr. Murphy.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me today. So let's start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background as an educator, administrator, and retired superintendent.
Yes. Well, thank you. And good morning, everyone. And I'm so happy you're listening. I started my career as an elementary school teacher, and I loved every minute of it. And then from there, I went and became an administrator, starting off as an assistant principal and then elementary school principal. And from there, I went to central office, where I fell in love with curriculum. And I eventually made the decision to become a superintendent. And I loved every minute of being a superintendent. The impact it can have on a district, on staff, on students and families is profound. I really respected the position. And I recently retired after 33 years in public education. And while I miss the people I work with, I am really looking forward to the next chapter in my life.
Very nice. And I will say, just to kind of put the aside in there, that Dr. Murphy's also from New Jersey, like Edric and myself. So just to give our listeners a frame of reference of where we are housed in terms of the educational landscape. So tell us a little bit about how you view the role of the arts in education. What purpose do or can the arts serve within the educational work?
Yeah, great question. And I will say they have already, we know through research that the arts improves teaching and learning. There's so much data out there that says that a good arts program increases student learning. However, my experience has been we have not leveraged the arts enough in K through 12 education. And I think it could really help us as we move forward with the complex challenges that we're facing in K through 12.
So can you dig into those complex challenges a little bit?
Sure, right? So we know that information is doubling every 13 months. I think that's the latest data point.
Which is incredible.
Yes.
Incredible stat.
Well, if you think about it, in the early 1900s, knowledge was doubling every 100 years. Fast forward that it's now doubling every 13 months, and who knows what it'll be a year from now. So the fact that we know this, and you know, the latest gorilla in the room is AI, which
Right.
I'm really intrigued about the impact it will have. I think that is a challenge that K through 12 has yet to really embrace, and that is what is important to know, what are the skills that we need to teach our young people, but more importantly, how do we get them to think critically, to make meaning, and to understand. And I think the arts have done a great job over the years with that. However, the other subject matters have not really focused in on how the arts have accomplished that. And I think with the fact that knowledge is now doubling, you know, every 12 or 13 months, it's going to force us to really rethink what should we be teaching in schools.
And how? a little bit of the
Yep.
how we approach it, because there is, and I think that's one of the things the arts has done well, is we've always focused on the process, and the process leads to a product typically, right? But when you're more focused on getting the kids there and what they learn through that time to get to that concert, to get to that art show, to get to that performance in whatever realm it is, that's where all those skills happen, versus we're focused on filling you with this knowledge so you can spit it back out at the end.
Yeah, and let's be honest, right? The arts, in that analogy, have an advantage. It's a performance based type of
Right.
subject, right?
Absolutely.
But your point is well taken that we need to take that aspect, and we need, and the analogy I've used is getting kids to ride a bike. Public schools, if we had to teach our young people how to ride a bike, we would label, we would identify, we would watch videos, we would pass the bike around, but we would never get on the bike.
Right.
And the arts are the perfect example. Again, it's a performance based subject matter, but they're riding the bike, right? They're picking up the instrument and they're trying. Not only do you teach them, chords and so forth, or the different types of medium, if it's a, different type of art, but you're doing it. And that's one of the key aspects that we need to take into the other subject matter is we got to get kids to ride the bike far more often than they're doing right now. And that's one of the key takeaways that I've really admired from all the different arts that we've had in the school districts that I've led. And you can see those transferable skills into other unique situations.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, I jumped on the SEL bandwagon very quickly, because I'm like, this is the arts. Social emotional learning is
Sure.
the arts. This is what we do. All of these core competencies are innate in how we approach teaching and learning in the classroom. And so I think that that's really important to this. So that kind of leads us to the conversation of, what is your definition of creativity?
Well, for full disclosure, I am an unabashed fan of Ken Robinson, Sir Ken.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Right?
Hopefully everyone is giving a little bow
Yes,
down right now.
and saying we miss Ken.
We miss Ken.
His sense of humor.
Yes.
His intelligence, his unique perspective. He's a rock star in the world that I admire so much. He's my daughter's Nile Horn.
Yes. Yes.
He's
Yes.
she still gets a little tingly when we talk about Nile, and that's the same way about Sir Ken. So I subscribe to his definition, which is creativity. It's an original idea that has value.
I love that.
And that was profound when I read that. It's still profound, 15 years later. It's something that has helped me as I led two really successful school districts in my superintendent's career. And it's helped me empower other educators that the definition of being creative is not just seeing colors and how they match, or being wonderful on stage, or participating in marching band. And those are all wonderful things to have, especially in a K through 12 education. But we can have and should have creative mathematics teachers,
Absolutely.
chemistry teachers. Mm-hmm. And that really hit when I read that definition, I forget, it was in one of his earliest works. It really stuck with me over my leadership career.
I love that. So, what do you believe is the most important thing to teach or impart upon our students?
Oh, great question. So we in Ramsey, the district that I just recently retired from, we went on this great journey just to absolutely identify that. And we were the first K through 12 district in New Jersey to create a profile of a graduate. And that was such an incredible process. If you're listening out there and in public education or in education, I definitely recommend that you take this journey. And we believe that it starts with a strong foundation in content. But as Tony Wagner has written many times and has said, it's not just what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. So about 10 years ago, we really started focusing in on those practices, such as thinking critically, communicating, collaboration, creativity, empathy. And those are the types of things that we value as much as, if not more, what your SAT score is or what your standardized test score is. And I think more leaders need to stand up and say that those are wonderful data points, those standardized test scores, those APs can be very helpful for children to or students to help them offset the outrageous cost of higher ed, but they're not the end product. The end product is having adults who follow their passion, are good citizens, are kind to each other, and that starts with strong content, but also doing something with that content um, that makes a positive difference in our communities.
It kind of comes down to what are we preparing students for, right? The job market has changed, and unfortunately, in my opinion, the education world hasn't kept up with those changing times necessarily in terms of how teachers approach in the classroom. And I think the STEAM movement tried to kind of spark that shift, that focused from test scores, from regurgitation of facts and information to more of that, your version of creativity, right? And Sir Ken Robinson's and really my version of what is creativity in trying to prepare our students for jobs that we don't know what they are going to be, that don't even exist right now. And having that focus on understanding who they are, being able to think outside of the box, being able to problem solve, be able to think critically and creatively to solve problems. And so I think too often we end up in our little silos instead of, I think that collaboration helps. I think that being willing to look outside of the box.
Yeah, I agree. I would say to you it's probably the early 1990s, right? Where graduates were not guaranteed a job when they graduated from higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the mid 1990s. I don't have exact dates or research on that, but that's sort of my recollection of it. And it it's interesting that coincides with the standards movement.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's a study in there somewhere, folks. For those who are interested, there's a study in there. And the standards movement, while well intended, has had some unintended consequences.
100%.
And one of the unintended consequences is we now are hyper focused on incorporating the standards in our curriculum, and I want to stress this, and testing them.
Yes.
As a form of assessment. And good educators know that a test is not always a great assessment.
Agreed.
You need to do it, but and I think that it's interesting that with the standards movement and our hyper focus on testing, and then No Child Left Behind, and all the politics behind that, we have become far less creative in designing curriculum.
Yes.
So I'm old enough to say curriculum wasn't well designed and was really left to with too many holes in the 80s.
Agreed.
And I'm not that old, folks. But I inherited that starting to teach in the late 80s and early 90s. And then the pendulum swaying to be hyper focused.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I encourage educational leaders to do is you have um, a lot of leeway in interpreting the standards when designing curriculum. And one of the things that I have seen are we outsource the thinking of the curriculum process and the design of it. And I do think, like a great artist, right? You interpret a song and you make it your own. I've never seen a high school production, and I've seen Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor,
Dreamcoats.
right?
Great show.
Yeah, but it's done differently every time they do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You interpret the music, you interpret the dance, the sets,
Costumes,
everything.
everything.
It is different.
Yeah.
And we need to have a more creative thought process when designing curriculum, so we can really create that roadmap for teachers to get them to think, to get our students to think critically. So that's a perfect example of how we can learn from the arts.
Yes.
And, to bring it back full circle, how we can, a great lesson we can learn from the arts when we as leaders are making decisions for these for our school districts and for our staff, because teachers, 99% of teachers really want to do what's right for kids.
Absolutely.
Okay. But either our roadmap is too strict or our roadmap is so general that they're lost.
Agreed.
And we as leaders in education, whether it's a formal administrator position or a teacher leader or a student leader, we need to do a better job of giving them that roadmap.
I love that. One last bit. As an administrator, for our arts education listeners, what piece of advice from the other side, from the admin side, would you have for them to take back, or in terms of advocacy and working within schools? They may not have the luxury of having a supervisor of the arts, right?
Yeah.
And so what piece of advice would you give them moving forward?
Well, one is to remain focused on students, right? The arts for many of our students are a safe place.
Yes.
Okay. And I used to always say, as a superintendent, I need a safe place for every student: the athlete, the academic, the art student, the robotic child, the gamer, the one who doesn't fit in all the places. So don't underestimate the power of being a safe place for students and being a place where they can really continue their own personal interest and so forth. But I would also say that I think we need to do a better job of connecting the arts on developing a really well-rounded student. And we have this misconception that you have to be interested or be artistic to take art classes.
Yes.
Okay. And I would suggest that some of it is self-imposed as a student. I just did an exercise with teachers in math, and I asked them to explain algebra and with administrators, and they were frozen because they said, I'm not a math person.
Right.
So I bet if we said that to students about art, they'll say, oh, I'm not artistic.
Agreed.
However, everyone is artistic. Everyone is creative.
Yes.
Everyone has original ideas. So I think, yes, a little of it is our own thought process of how we view ourselves. But I think educators, to get back to your point, I think educators can do a better job, especially in high school, in almost recruiting the quote unquote non-artistic child for a pottery class or to get up on stage. Yeah, you may not be in the lead of Anything Goes,
Right.
You know, like
But that's fine. There's a role for everybody.
There's a role for
And I
everyone.
think that that's important. Sometimes we also focus on our top 20%.
Yeah.
And so what are we offering that reaches all students? All.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really important. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. That was episode 5, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Dr. Murphy, for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.